The sun was beginning to dip low on the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the quiet country road. A gleaming 1967 Mustang sat motionless by the side, its hood open and steam curling into the warm evening air. Beside it, a wealthy man in a crisp suit paced back and forth, his frustration mounting with every glance at the lifeless engine. He had always relied on money to solve problems, yet here, stranded in the middle of nowhere, his wealth seemed powerless. Inside the car, his teenage daughter watched him with worried eyes. She loved the Mustang, not just for its shine and beauty, but because it had been her late mother's favorite car. Now, seeing it broken down, her heart felt heavier than she could explain. Cars rushed by in the distance, the sound of their engines echoing like reminders of how utterly alone they were in that moment. Not one slowed down to offer help. The father waved angrily at the passing vehicles, muttering under his breath about the uselessness of people these days. His daughter, however, sat quietly, her eyes scanning the road in hope that someone might stop. Then, almost unexpectedly, a rattling sound broke the silence. An old, rusted bicycle appeared in the distance, its rider pedaling steadily closer. He was a thin man with oil-stained clothes, his hands calloused from years of labor. Strapped to the back of his bicycle was a worn-out toolbox, rattling with every bump in the road. Slowing as he noticed the stranded car, the man studied the scene with kind, observant eyes. He could see the distress on the girl's face, the impatience in the father's movements, and the helplessness of a machine that once roared with power but now sat broken. Without hesitation, he pulled his bicycle over. Something inside him simply wouldn't let him pass by. The mechanic leaned his bicycle gently against a nearby tree and walked toward the shiny Mustang. His steps were slow but steady, each one carrying a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the rich man's restless pacing. Wiping his hands on the side of his worn trousers, he spoke in a calm, almost humble voice. "Looks like you're having some trouble, sir. Maybe I can take a look." The wealthy man stopped in his tracks, his brow furrowed with doubt. His eyes ran over the stranger's ragged shirt, the grease marks on his face, and the old bicycle that seemed to scream poverty. He shook his head, muttering, "This is a classic Mustang, not some cheap car. I don't think you're the right man for this." The mechanic didn't argue, nor did he take offense. Instead, he simply offered a soft smile. "Sir, I may not look like much, but sometimes help comes from where we least expect it." His words hung in the air, quiet yet powerful. Inside the car, the daughter leaned forward, her voice carrying a sincerity her father rarely heard. "Dad, let him try. Please. What do we have to lose?" Her eyes met the mechanic's, and for a moment she saw something in him, an honesty, a sense of purpose, that made her believe he was more than he seemed. The father let out a long breath, torn between pride and the desperation of the situation. Finally, with a reluctant wave of his hand, he stepped aside. "Fine. Do what you can. But don't make it worse." The mechanic gave a small nod, kneeling by the hood of the car. "I promise you, sir, I'll treat it as if it were my own." At that moment, it wasn't just about fixing an engine, it was about a chance to prove that kindness and skill could come from even the humblest of places. The mechanic rolled up his sleeves, revealing arms hardened by years of labor, and carefully leaned over the open hood. His hands moved with a grace that didn't match his appearance. Quick, precise, almost like a pianist finding the right notes on a keyboard. The sound of tools clicking and metals shifting filled the silence. He worked without rushing, as though he knew exactly what the Mustang needed. The father stood with his arms crossed, still skeptical, his eyes narrowing with each passing second. But the daughter, unable to look away, found herself drawn to the quiet determination in the mechanic's face. Every movement spoke of experience, of countless hours spent with engines most people would never care to touch. The man wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, his gaze fixed on the intricate parts before him. He tightened a bolt here, adjusted a wire there, and finally tapped the carburetor with the gentle precision of someone who truly understood its language. For a tense moment, there was nothing but silence and the faint rustling of the wind. Then, with a deep breath, he turned the key. The engine coughed once, then again, and suddenly roared to life, louder and prouder than it had in years. The sound echoed across the empty road like a triumphant song. The father's eyes widened, his mouth opening in shock. He had expected failure, maybe even damage, but certainly not this. The daughter clapped her hands together in pure joy, her face lighting up as if the sun had risen again just for her. The mechanic stepped back, his hands still dark with grease, yet his smile brighter than anything they had seen that day. "There she is," he said softly, almost to the car itself. In that moment it was clear, this man hadn't just fixed the machine. He had restored something deeper: hope, respect, and wonder. The roar of the Mustang's engine slowly faded into a steady, confident purr as the mechanic closed the hood with care. The wealthy man stared at him in disbelief, almost unable to reconcile how someone with so little could do what expensive garages had often failed to achieve. Breaking the silence, he asked sharply, "How did you know what to do?" The mechanic simply wiped his hands on a rag and gave a quiet smile. "I've loved these cars since I was a boy," he explained. "I used to dream of owning one someday. Couldn't afford it, of course, but that didn't stop me from studying every piece, every sound, every secret under the hood. Dreams don't always come true the way we imagine. Sometimes they come true when we get the chance to use what we know to help others." The daughter, who had been standing just behind her father, felt her chest tighten as his words sank in. There was something pure in his honesty, something that made her realize wealth wasn't the true measure of a person's worth. She saw a man who carried his struggles like invisible scars, yet still chose to share his gift without asking for anything in return. The father shifted uncomfortably, his pride wrestling with the truths standing before him. For the first time that day, he really looked at the mechanic, not at his torn clothes or battered shoes, but at the strength in his character. There was humility there, but also greatness. He swallowed hard, sensing something he hadn't expected: respect. The air grew still, and for a brief moment, time seemed to pause. The Mustang wasn't just fixed, it had become a bridge between two worlds. And in that silence, both father and daughter realized they were witnessing more than a repair. They were witnessing the power of a dream that never gave up. The wealthy man instinctively reached for his wallet, pulling out a thick stack of bills as if money could somehow equal the value of what had just been given. But before he could extend his hand, the mechanic raised his palm and shook his head firmly. "No, sir. I didn't do this for money. I only did what I knew how to do. That's enough for me." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made the father pause. For a man who had always believed that everything had a price, this refusal struck him harder than he expected. The daughter stepped forward, her eyes shining with emotion. She could feel her throat tighten as she spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her words carrying more sincerity than any gesture of wealth could match. "I've never seen someone give so much without expecting anything back. You've not only fixed the car, you've reminded me what real kindness looks like." The mechanic gave her a small nod, his smile gentle, as though her gratitude was worth more than any fortune. The father, moved in a way he hadn't felt in years, lowered the wallet slowly. A long silence stretched between them before he finally said, "You may not want money, but a man like you deserves more than just words." With surprising humility, he extended a hand, not for payment, but for partnership. "I own a company with an auto division. A place where someone with your talent could change lives. If you're willing, I'd be honored to have you work with us." The mechanic's eyes widened, not with greed, but with disbelief and quiet gratitude. What began as a broken-down car on a lonely road had turned into something greater: a chance at dignity, respect, and a future shaped by kindness.